minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the time here tonight. I wanted to speak with the body here about the situation in the West with wildfire and drought. As so many of you know from the news, there's wildfire breaking out all over in the western states. My home state of California has several going on right now. I represent the very north part of the state, the 1st Congressional District, and we have fires reaching the, routinely now the 5-digit mark, including the newest one known as the Dixie Fire. It's over 30,000 acres. My understanding was 11,000 new acres just last night and burning up in the area of the Feather River Canyon. But this is not, unfortunately, news this time of year or in the West. Anything west of the Rocky Mountains pretty much seems to be on the line. What's going on is that for many, many years, we in this country valued, the Smokey the Bear principle of putting out fires when they occur in the forest. And I think we still do value that. But what we haven't done on the back side of that is to manage our forest lands. And so what we've seen in the decades since a good-minded policy, a good intended policy, is that the forests have built up so much fuel, so much damage gets done from all this fuel being built up from fire season. It kind of creates its own drought situation inside the forest there when you have more inventory per acre than what this forest can sustain, especially during a drought period. And so in the West, in California, it's known you're going to have drought years, you're going to have wet years, and it's kind of part of the goes with the program there, And so I'm disturbed that we can't advance the ball more on really the type of forest management we need to be doing. We can sustain X amount of trees per acre, and this is depending on tree type, tree age, the particular landscape, the particular weather pattern in a micro area. But if we're not doing that, then we're going to see this year after year after year. And so U.S. Forest Service has kind of transitioned from not that many years ago, about 1/3 of their budget would go for fire suppression and 2/3 for the good green work, we call it, green harvest, permits, maintenance of forest roads, and all the other things you do in the off-season in order to make the asset protected from fire and also usable to the people, because this is indeed the people's asset. And they're getting less and less access to it because of fire, but also just flat being closed down because of other environmental concerns have been brought up. And that's a key part of the argument here, is that we've had hundreds of thousands of acres burned. I'll just stick with California for a moment here. And simple projects after the fact, when we're talking salvage timber that needs to be removed after a fire, if you do that within a reasonably soon amount of time after a fire, then you can still get value out of that timber if you do it soon. No more than a year would be ideal. But what happens is that when Forest Service goes to try and contract or do some of the work post-fire to remove trees that will be dead or are already dead but still have a salvage value, you could make a timber product out of that, they get sued. The environmental groups come in and sue them saying, oh, we think you're going to take away habitat for the black-backed woodpecker or something like that. And indeed, what has already happened is the environment has been ruined for quite a few years, where the spotted owl might have been, where other owl might have been, where other wildlife have been. You should see some of the horrific pictures of how the wildlife is affected in a fire like this. And these, not just a small, slow-moving fire, but these conflagrations that we have these days that move from treetop to treetop across the whole landscape. And one of the saddest stories you'll see is a rancher just right in my home county of Butte on the east side who wrote the story about how their family had been there for at least 5 generations and longtime ranchers there. And a fire whipped through there and took out so many of their livestock, but also the legacy, the land that they love has been ruined by that fire in eastern Butte County of California last year. So what are we going to do? Are we going to continue to watch this go on year after year after year? I've run legislation to try and make it just a little bit simpler to do a basic, I think, common sense idea of trimming around power lines, moving hazardous trees and foliage away from power lines. But That means you're going to have to cut some trees. That means you're going to have to do some trimming. You're going to have to do some actual work. The environmental groups even sue over that. So I'm hearing reports that one of the latest fires might have been where a hazardous tree fell into a power line. Why can't we create a zone around all power lines? The lines are already there. It's not like we're putting in new ones. To make it where there's enough distance around power lines that if a tree does fall, it doesn't fall into them and you get two bad things, a fire and blackouts. So we'll continue in Congress here to try and legislate that way, and I want to convince my colleagues on both sides of the aisle this is very important because we're losing millions of acres every year to wildfire, losing millions of acres of habitat for wildlife, millions of acres of wood products, as you see with wood products spiraling through the roof. It's added $30,000 to $40,000 easily to the cost of a new home because of the high cost of wood products. Anybody's been to any of the vendors to buy a piece of plywood or a 2x4, you know, and it affects everybody. It isn't just those building homes. I mean, think about folks that need, you know, for other disasters, our friends that have to suffer hurricanes down there. Where do they get the plywood to be able to board up for that? You know, we have to produce these products. We have to produce them domestically. We can't import everything in this country. In my real life, I'm a farmer, you know, and we can't continue to have the situation where we're going to rely on imported food or somehow replace our wood products. For some reason, the United States is the #2 importer of wood of all countries. Why are we importing wood when we have so much of an overload, an over-inventory in our western states that we should be employing our people and getting that material out? Now, people are going to be fearful that, oh, you're talking about clear cutting. No, it isn't clear cutting. That's the first thing they want to ask you when you have a press conference or something about it. So you want to clear cut everything? No. We do this in zones. We do this with thinning. You do areas where you might do a 30-acre spot, but then you plant it back, especially on private land. And you can tell what the private land is versus the federal land that is basically almost not managed by flying over it after a fire, or especially 5 years after a fire, when you can see the checkerboard pattern you find so frequently of land ownership in forested areas, that the private lands have already reclaimed, they've already salvaged, they've already started planting back. You can see the green, you can see order coming back to those forests there. In the federal land, you still see the same snags, the same ghost trees, I call them, are there left behind to who knows when they'll ever get around to it. And what does that mean? It propagates the next fire, the next time lightning strikes, or the next one blows through, or the next time there might be some kind of an accident. So I really, really want to get the attention of my colleagues here in Congress, those that regulate the forests, those in the U.S. Forest Service, and those of the American people, their attention to what's going on, because this is not sustainable, it's not good for anything I've talked about with wildlife, the asset the American people own in these federal lands. And we must do something to address some things that might be inconvenient. Cutting some trees, not all the trees. You might have controlled burns during the correct time of year to get rid of some of the slash. But on the positive side, why aren't we using this biomass? Taking this wooded material out here that doesn't turn into a 2x4 or a baseball bat or what have you, and turning that into something useful that we can use to generate electricity. Heaven knows we don't have an oversupply of electricity generated in California. We even saw Texas with a problem last winter. So we're going to need to develop these sources. And that means jobs in these rural communities, jobs cleaning up the forest, and a dependable 24/7 electricity supply because you can control the fuel. Solar, you don't control the fuel. You have to have a sunny day without clouds or have it not be nighttime. The wind machines, you can't control them either. 24/7 fuel sources, whether it's hydro, whether it's nuke, whether it's natural gas, or biomass using these wooded products we need to use for something positive anyway. We need to put them to work so we have a stable grid. Heaven knows with all the new demands that are being made by environmental-minded people on more electric cars, getting rid of gas stoves, getting rid of gas water heaters, all for electricity. Where's all this electricity going to come from? We can be generating it with things that come from our forests, with these byproducts that we need to be putting to work. So I'm just implore everybody that has a role in making a decision around here, in Congress, with our federal agencies, environmental groups, could you please back off a little bit and let some of this good work happen? and the American people listen to what we're talking about and encourage those folks that may be timid or not inclined to want to do the type of forest management. Encourage your member of Congress that this has got to be done, because this air quality affects all the West. It's even, last year, some of it even blew back all the way to the East Coast from fires that were happening in California and the West. So we can do a heck of a lot better. So I appreciate the time here tonight. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, my good colleague from Kentucky, Mr. James Comer.